Our 10th anniversary dinner was meant to be a sanctuary. 10 years of life, love, and quiet, shared moments deserved a space of its own, and the dimly lit bistro on a cobblestone side street felt like the perfect place. Ben, my husband and a history professor at the local university, was smiling across the table, his eyes crinkling at the corners in that familiar way that still made my heart skip a beat. The stress of midterm season, which usually clung to him like a second skin, seemed to have been left at the door. He was just Ben, my partner in a decade of shared jokes and triumphs. To us, he said, raising his glass of Cabernet. 10 years. Feels like yesterday and a lifetime all at once. I clinked my glass against his. To us. And to many more. We talked about everything and nothing, our first chaotic meeting in a coffee shop, the disastrous camping trip where it rained for 3 days straight, the day we adopted our golden retriever, Gus. The air was filled with warmth, nostalgia, and a silent, comfortable understanding that only comes from a decade of building a life together. It was a perfect, peaceful night. As we were finishing our main course, a delicious beef bourguignon, I noticed her. A young woman, sitting alone at a small table by the window. She had a mop of dark, curly hair and was wearing a university sweatshirt. My first thought was a passing moment of pity. It was a Friday night, and she looked utterly dejected. But then I saw her looking at us. Not a casual glance, but a direct, intense stare. I nudged Ben under the table. Ben, I whispered, do you know her? He glanced over, his smile fading slightly. Oh. Yeah, that's Zoe. She's in my advanced Roman Republic seminar. Bright kid, but she's been struggling with the last few assignments. A little intense. He gave a small, professional wave. She didn't wave back. She just continued to watch us, her expression unreadable. Ben went back to his story, but the rhythm of our evening was subtly thrown off. The quiet intimacy felt a little less private. The music from the string quartet seemed to fade into the background. I kept finding my eyes drifting back to her, and each time, she was already looking at us. It was a strange, unsettling feeling, like being watched through a one-way mirror. I tried to shake it off, but an uneasy feeling settled deep in my stomach. The moment the waiter cleared our plates and set down the dessert menu, Zoe got up. She walked directly toward our table, not a hint of hesitation in her step. My heart gave a little jolt. Professor Davies, she said, her voice a little too loud for the intimate setting. Ben put on his professional face immediately. Zoe. What a surprise. Nice to see you. He was good at this. The warm, friendly, but clearly this is a social interaction tone of a professor running into a student outside of class. I smiled politely, trying to be welcoming. I didn't expect to see you here, she said, but her tone was accusatory, not surprised. She was looking at Ben, but her eyes kept flicking to me, a flash of something unidentifiable in them. It's our 10th anniversary, Ben explained simply, gesturing to me. We're celebrating. Zoe's gaze settled on me for a moment, a tight smile on her lips. Oh. Right. Happy anniversary. It sounded less like a wish and more like a diagnosis. She then proceeded to ignore my existence entirely and launched into a monologue about her last paper. The grading had been too harsh, the feedback too vague, and the expectations too high. Ben listened patiently, his professionalism a shield against her increasingly agitated tone. He tried to steer the conversation back to the present, to wish her a good weekend, and to say he would be available during his office hours next week. But she wasn't listening. Zoe didn't take the hint. She didn't leave. As Ben tried to gently end the conversation, she planted her hands on the edge of our table, her eyes wide and a little glassy. I just don't understand, Professor, she said, her voice cracking. I worked so hard on that paper. I've been struggling with your class all semester. It feels like you're doing it on purpose. The accusation hung in the air, thick and unwelcome. Ben's face remained neutral, a testament to his years of dealing with emotionally charged students. Zoe, that's not fair, he said calmly. My feedback is meant to help you improve. I want you to succeed. But I can't, she cried. I keep trying, and it's never enough. Nothing is ever enough for you. The other diners were starting to look over. The string quartet had stopped playing for a moment, the sudden silence making Zoe's outburst even more jarring. This was no longer a professional encounter. It was a full-blown scene. Then, her gaze shifted to me again, a bitter edge in her voice. I just thought that for once, you might have time for me. But I guess you're too busy celebrating with your wife. She paused, took a shuddering breath, and the words that followed were a cold bucket of water over our perfect night. It feels like you're trying to pretend I don't exist, even though I'm pregnant with your baby. The silence that followed her statement was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It wasn't a silence of calm, but a void where all sound and reason had been sucked away. Ben's face went from pale to ashen. My own breath caught in my throat. I couldn't process what she had just said. Ben was the first to react, his voice low and firm, filled with a disbelief that was both palpable and absolute. Zoe, that is an insane lie. You need to stop. But she was beyond listening to reason. Her composure shattered completely. She started to cry, loud, wrenching sobs that drew every eye in the restaurant. No. It's true. You know it's true, she screamed, her voice echoing off the walls. You just don't want to face it. You don't want to leave her for me. I was in a state of shock, a silent witness to a scene that felt ripped from a nightmare. Ben, however, was still trying to handle it with a professor's measured authority, but it was useless. She was a runaway train, and the momentum was gaining speed. She began to pound her fists on our table, her cries growing more frantic. The restaurant manager, a man named Marcus, approached the table with two waiters. Miss, you need to calm down, he said gently but firmly. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. No, she shrieked. He can't just pretend this didn't happen. He's the father of my baby. Ben looked at me, a silent apology in his eyes, but I didn't need one. I knew. I knew without a single doubt that she was lying. My husband would never, could never, do something like this. He was a man of unwavering integrity. This was a tragedy, a malicious, public lie from a woman in the throes of a psychological break. The manager, seeing that the situation was out of control, called the police. Ben, though shaken, was the one who insisted on it. He saw her state as a potential danger to herself and to others. She was hysterical and out of control. It wasn't about a grade anymore, and it wasn't even about a lie, it was about a person in crisis. Two officers arrived a few minutes later. They were calm, professional, and took in the scene immediately. Zoe, seeing them, became even more agitated. She tried to run, screaming, "They're going to hurt my baby." The police had to restrain her, gently but firmly. As they escorted her out, she continued to scream, "I'm pregnant with your baby." Her cries echoed through the restaurant as the other diners watched in a horrified silence. Ben and I were left at our table, the untouched dessert and the quiet whispers of the other diners now a stark reminder of what had been lost. An officer stayed behind to take our statement. Ben recounted the entire evening, from the moment he had seen her to the moment she had been led away. He explained her academic struggles and his concern for her mental health. He also, without a hint of hesitation, stated that he had never had a romantic or physical relationship with her. The officer was sympathetic but all business. They had to follow procedure. They took down our names, contact information, and the full timeline of the evening. The perfect anniversary dinner was now a police report. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls and disbelief. Ben was immediately put on administrative leave from the university pending an investigation. It was a standard procedure, but it felt like a punishment. He spent his days on the phone with the dean of students, with the university's legal team, and with the campus counseling services, all of whom were now deeply involved. I stood by him, a rock of support. I told every single person who would listen that this was a lie, a delusion from a student who was clearly unwell. I provided his alibi for the last year. I was with him every single night, every single day. The accusation, on any other day, would have been laughable. But now, with a police report and a university investigation hanging over our heads, it felt terrifyingly real. We were trying to pick up the pieces of our life. The incident had been more than an embarrassment, it had been an emotional assault. Our friends were supportive, but you could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes. The unspoken question, what if? The police informed us that Zoe had been held for a public disturbance and had been given a psychological evaluation. They had also, as a matter of course, administered a pregnancy test. The results were negative. The core of her claim, the one thing that could have made all of this a terrifying reality, was a lie. We felt a momentary flash of relief, but it was quickly replaced by a profound sadness for Zoe and the knowledge that this was far from over. Just as we thought the worst was behind us, the real nightmare began. A few days later, a lawyer representing Zoe contacted the university. The lawyer's statement was a new kind of shock, a blatant and calculated lie. They claimed that Zoe had, in fact, been pregnant, but that the emotional distress and physical force of her arrest had caused her to suffer a miscarriage. They were now threatening legal action against the university, the police department, and Ben himself for the alleged wrongful death of her unborn child. The lie was so audacious, so manipulative, that it took our breath away. This was no longer a young woman in a state of crisis. This was a deliberate, vengeful attempt to destroy Ben's career and our lives. The pregnancy test from the police station was a simple fact, a stone-cold truth, but a lawyer's statement in the public sphere was far more powerful. It created a narrative, a story that could be believed, a story that could ruin us. The university's legal team jumped into action. This was no longer a professor-student issue, it was a legal crisis. Ben, who had been a beacon of calm professionalism, started to show the strain. He was working with the lawyers, providing every shred of evidence, every email, every text message, every professional interaction he had ever had with Zoe. The investigation was no longer just about her claims, it was about protecting ourselves from a full-blown legal assault. The truth, as it always does, eventually came to light. The university's legal team, working with the police, presented irrefutable evidence. First, the medical report from the police station confirmed that Zoe was never pregnant. The claim of a miscarriage was a total fabrication. Second, they found evidence of a deep and troubling pattern of behavior. Zoe had a documented history of mental health issues and had made similar, though less dramatic, claims about other professors and authority figures in her past. The university's investigation cleared Ben completely. The dean issued a formal apology for the stress and disruption, and Ben's lead was immediately lifted. The lawyer's claim was dismissed, and the focus shifted, once again, to getting Zoe the help she so desperately needed. Her parents, who had been supporting the lawyer's claims, finally saw the truth and realized the depth of their daughter's mental health crisis. The legal battle was over before it even began. The whole ordeal was a harsh lesson in the fragility of truth and the power of a lie. A single, insane statement had almost unraveled a decade of trust and a lifetime of hard work. We were relieved, but we were also exhausted. The anniversary dinner, once a symbol of our love, was now a scar, a memory of a time we were almost torn apart. A few weeks later, after the dust had settled and the final legal documents had been signed, Ben made a new reservation. He called it our anniversary redo. This time, the restaurant was different, a place that served comfort food in a brightly lit, friendly atmosphere. There was no string quartet, no hushed whispers. Just the gentle clatter of dishes and the happy chatter of other diners. We sat across from each other, our hands linked across the table. So, Ben said, a warm smile on his face, where were we? I laughed, a sound of genuine joy that felt like a release. We were talking about our camping trip where it rained for 3 days straight. "Ah, yes," he said, his eyes twinkling. "The one where you somehow managed to set a hot dog on fire with a single match." We laughed, and in that moment, all the tension and stress from the last few weeks seemed to dissipate. The unfortunate anniversary dinner had been a strange, painful detour, a reminder that the world could sometimes intrude on even the most sacred of moments. But it had also been a testament to our strength as a couple, to our ability to face an unexpected crisis and come out of it together, still holding hands. Our anniversary wasn't perfect, not in the way we had planned, but in a strange, bittersweet way, it was even more memorable. It was a story we would tell each other for years to come, a shared secret that reaffirmed our bond. A new chapter in a story that was still being written, a story of love, support, and the quiet, steady rhythm of a life built together.